Hi everybody and welcome to my sewing room. If you haven't been here before, my name is Rosemary and I try and do a lot of different kinds of projects. We do a lot of dolls here. We do a little bit of quilting. We do a lot of stuff on my embroidery machine. So if you have an embroidery machine, I think you'll really enjoy this video. And we do a little bit of sewing. And it's snowing right now, really bad outside, and we're expecting a storm here in Colorado. So I've come home from work a little bit early. I'm going to get started on my video for the weekend. And what I thought I would do is I would make a little dress for my great-granddaughter. My great-granddaughter's name is Luna, and she's about a year old. And I'm really excited to be able to start making some of those fun little dresses that I used to make when my own little girls were little. So what I want to do is I want to use a pattern, a really basic little pattern. And one of the reasons I like this pattern in particular is it says 6 great looks. It has a collar in it. It has little panties in it. It's got sleeves or no sleeves. And it also has a little hem band on the bottom that we can kind of play around with. But I'm going to do some heirloom sewing on this little dress. And if you don't know what heirloom sewing is something that they used to do a long time ago, where they would put a lot of little tiny embroidery stitches in their sewing, and you would spend hours and hours on it, so that they would call it an heirloom. It was one of those where when grandma handed it to the new mom, she'd say, take care of this because I worked really hard on it and it's been passed down through the family. So that's why they call it an heirloom. But we don't have to put a lot of hours into it anymore because we have lots of stitches on our sewing machine that will do that kind of stuff. And just to give you a little idea, there's all sorts of books out there that I have been reading probably for the last 20 years that have to do with heirloom sewing. This is one that I really like a lot. And here is another one. And here's another one. So if you Google heirloom sewing, you will see there's a whole lot of books out there that will teach you different kinds of techniques that you can do with lace and pin tucks and entredot and insertion lace. And you can make some historic looking outfits, or you can just take a little girl's dress and add a little bit of bling to it to make it really fun. Another book I have, this one is called Heirloom Doll Clothes for Gott's Dolls. It's a Martha Campbell Pullen, which she does a lot of heirloom sewing. These are doll clothes, but if you make them, you can learn the techniques on how to do heirloom sewing. And I am going to show you a little bit of techniques on how to do heirloom sewing in this video. One of the things you are really going to need is you're going to need a wing needle. And you can buy that at your fabric store. It's a little bit different. It's got little wings on the side. Some people call it a hemstitch needle. You're also going to need some pins, and then probably about a yard of one color and a yard of another color. So I have got yellow and I've got white. These are not printed fabrics. They're really basic. Color on color, like this is yellow on yellow and this is white on white. So it has a little bit of texture to it, but we're going to put most of the decorations on the dress ourselves as we're working on it. And I wanted to show you, this is the pattern, and this has got several sizes, and I'm going to cut out the large, and I'm probably not going to trace it onto any kind of pattern paper because I go to Joann's and I buy them when they're $1.99 and I make them, and then if there's pieces missing, I go back and buy it again. But I may trace at least the one piece of the bodice onto tracing paper or freezer paper so that I can change the bodice a little bit. And then here's the skirts. And one of the things I like about this skirt pattern is it's not, it doesn't have kind of like a tapered top and go out. It's a rectangle, and with a rectangle it makes it really easy for me to be able to chop off the bottom and change a lot of things in it. So I'm gonna be doing that while I'm making this too. I also think it's really important for you to have a couple of kinds of stabilizers because we are going to do some embroidery. This is a stitch and wash that just tears off very, very easily, and this is a wet and gun that completely dissolves, and I will be using that while I'm making this little dress. So I think that's just about everything. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the embroidery machine, and I'm gonna show you how you can make a border that we can put along the bottom of this little skirt. If you don't have an embroidery machine, don't worry about it, because most machines have like little hearts and flowers on the bottom that you can put across it, or you don't have to do anything. You can just go out and buy some little rickrack and put it across the bottom. But if you do have an embroidery machine, make sure that you stay tuned, because we're gonna learn a little bit about sewing a border. Okay, so we're in front of my Stellaire sewing machine. Do you like my crochet hook stylist? I'm always losing my stylus. I don't know where I put it. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to take you into the menu that looks like we're going to do sewing stitches. And I showed you this before, that in the Stellaire, in the Dream Machine, and in the Luminaire, you have the option of taking your regular sewing decorative stitches and putting them in the hoop to make them a little bit easier to sew out rather than trying to keep the fabric straight. I really like those stitches a lot. They're fun to do, and we'll do more things with it in the future. But today we're going to use this little menu that's right here that looks like buttonholes. And if you hit it, it's basically the decorations that you put around a buttonhole. You also have, if I go back into the menu again, you have the option of actually making a buttonhole in the hoop of the embroidery machine. And maybe we'll do that. I will think about it a little bit while we're working on this little dress. But right now we're going to go into here, and right across the top here, you have three little, I'm not even sure what kind of flower these are, but they're just like little yellow flowers. And we can use that to make a border stitch. So I'm going to choose this first one, and you can see that it's got about 4 different colors in it. And I'm going to set it down. And you can also see that it's not a very big design. One of the really good things about these machines that we're talking about is you can size things quite a bit. So if I push edit and size it up this way, it'll only go up about 20% and down 20%. But if I hit this button, it will allow me to go up 200%. So I can actually push this and see how much bigger that goes. So I could take that design and make it really big if I want to. I really don't want it to be that much bigger. I probably want it to be about, well, right now it says 1.33 by 2.85. I think that's about the size I want it to be. So now I'm going to take that and I'm going to rotate it, hit edit and rotate it 90 degrees. And then I'm going to duplicate it. So now I've got 2 of them. Let's rotate that around. And this kind of just nestle them. I don't want them to overlap, because this whole thing is not going to work if they overlap. So, but you can bring them pretty darn close to each other. And if you want to, you can hit this tool that's up here in the corner, and it will actually give you the option to hit the plus magnifying glass, and I can see how close I've got those, and maybe move them a little bit closer. So I'm going to say okay, and go in a little bit and up a little bit, and then hit that again. See, they're still not touching, but they're more nestled into each other, and that's what I want. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to select them both and group them together. And the way you do that is you have this button down here. You've got 3 different square, circle, and a triangle. I'm going to hit that, and then I'm going to hit this. This will select both of those together at the same time. Say okay, and then I have this button right here. It's a circle and a square with a red box around it. That's your group button, and you hit it and it'll group them. If it did not let you group them, you probably had them bumped into each other or had them overlapping a little bit. So just go back and move them a little bit. So I'm going to put it up here at the top, and then I'm going to hit this button right here. And it looks like 9 squares with the 3 on the side and the 3 on the bottom highlighted in blue. I'm going to hit that, and now I have the option to continue this design again. This one here will go up, this one here will go down. I want the one to go down because I got my design up here on the top, right? So I'm going to hit it. There's another one, but those are too far apart. I don't like that. So this here is saying it's going to push them together. So I'm going to hit that and make them come together. So they're almost on top of each other there. So I want to hit that again. And I think I might be able to squeeze one more in there. Let's try. Yep, there's another one. I don't want them to be too close together, because if they are, if I fill up the space from the top to the bottom, then when I go to re-hoop this to keep going down along the bottom of my border, it's going to be very difficult for me to line it up. Now, if you have a luminaire or a dream machine, there is a way you can use the snowman to do this, and it works really good. Unfortunately, I have a Stellaire and I can't do that, so I'm going to do it a different way. If you look right here, there's an arrow right here, and if you hit that, you have these arrows down here that are going to put a link that will help us line it up once we rehoop it. My red box is up here. I'm going to move my red box down to here, and I'm going to put a check mark in the corner of this one and a check mark in the corner of this one. That way I can line up the next design with those marks right there, and it will continue my border without any problem. If you have a Brother 6200, you still have the capability of doing this. You don't have the group button so that you could group it together, but you do have the border capability, so you could put something in and create a border in the same way that we're doing this. So give it a try if you don't have the Stellaire, the Luminaire, or the Dream Machine, if you have a 6200, and some of the other ones too. I'm trying to think of which other ones have that capability. I think the 2200 and the 5200 have that. You just have to look and see if you have this one right here that looks like, let me go back. This one here that looks like 9 little squares together. If you have that, you can make this border design. So what I'm going to do now that we have done this is I'm going to save this in my, I'm going to hit embroidery, and I'm going to save it in the memory so that I can bring it back up again after I rehoop it. And then I'm going to go ahead and get that little dress ready to go. Okay, so here is my pattern. I don't know how well you can see the dress pattern right here. This is actually the back of the dress. And I'm going to cut a strip of the white on white fabric, and I'm going to figure that how wide I want it to be. The back is going to be in 2 pieces and the front's going to be in 1 piece. I cut this about 5 inches wide this way, and I'm going to come across here, but I'm not going to cut it because I have to put it in the hoop. So I'm just going to mark it with one of my disappearing pins. The Fiskars pins, they you iron them and the color goes away, so it works really good for doing a mark. So I'm just going to take this and I'm going to mark it right here. That's one side, and then on this one I have another side, so I have an idea of how big that one's going to be. And then the front piece is going to be on a fold, so if I lay it down here on the fold and I mark it right here, that way I know about how far I have to run my border all the way across. I'm going to try and put it close to the bottom with enough seam allowance. But I measured this to 5, and I just cut a full width, the 45 inches of the fabric, 5 inches apart. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to embroider on that, and then we'll put it on the bottom of the skirt when we're ready to go. So let me move this out of the way. Here's my hoop bottom, and here's my tearaway stabilizer. And one of the reasons I like the stitch and wash is it is not a dissolvable, but it has a dissolvable stabilizer in it. So once I tear all of this off, I could actually wet it and the rest of it would come off very easily, and it makes it easy to take it away, but it's not going to dissolve completely. When you use a stabilizer that dissolves away completely, what happens is your embroidery starts to pucker if you're trying to embroider on a piece of cloth instead of doing something where you want it to be completely gone, like on organza or something. So I'm going to use KK2000. I'm going to spray it because this fabric is already cut at 5 inches, so it obviously is not going to fit in the hoop. And then I'm going to put this down where I marked it to do my embroidery at, and smooth it down so it doesn't move. And then I'm going to put the top on there to make sure it holds. And I need to make sure it's good and straight too, so I probably should have drawn a line this way too to keep it lined up with the notches here. But I think I did a pretty good job because I'm going to put it across the bottom here. So I'm going to tighten that. Sorry, my arm's in the way. And then I'm going to put it on the machine, and I'll show you how to go ahead and do that border stitch. Okay, so we're back at my Stellaire sewing machine, and here's the design that we created. And if you look here, see the way it shows green, yellow, yellow, orange, green, dark yellow, light yellow, orange. That's a lot of thread changes, right? But the good news is when I hit embroidery, is it will shuffle them. So now in this entire design, it's going to do all the green first, then all the dark yellow, then all the light yellow. So you're not going to change colors or a whole lot. That's kind of a neat thing that you can do with this. So I'm going to move this just a little bit so you can see my hoop. And I don't know if you can see it, but this is the edge of one piece of the fabric. This is the edge of the other piece of the fabric. And my design is here in the middle. And I wanted to move it over here so it's close to the edge of my fabric, because I want this along the hem of the little dress. So I'm going to hit this button that's down here on the bottom that does a check. So I'm going to hit it, and it's going to show me it's going to start approximately a ½ inch from the edge of my fabric, which is what I wanted it to do. And then I'm going to move it, and the whole thing's going to move this way, and it's going to show me it's going to come almost right up to my red line where I want to stop. So that makes it really good. So when I do the other piece, I really don't have to line it up. But I do want to keep it at least about ½ inch from the edge. Another thing I did, let's go back to this part right here, is I took it back out of the hoop again. One of the things I like about the Stellaire is it's got these little notches right on the end here. And that helped me to line up that strip of fabric a lot better so that I don't get a crooked line. It's one of the things I think I'm probably the most irresponsible about, trying to get things straight, and then I get mad at myself when it's not. So I did take it out of the hoop and straighten it up so those notches came together, and it looks pretty good. So another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this entire design and I'm going to move it up a little bit so it's not so close to the edge, because I want to put a border, a basting stitch around it to baste down this fabric so that it doesn't start to pucker as it's sewing my design. And if I go back over here and say, okay, sorry, my camera moved a little bit. Say, okay, and then hit layout. There's a button right here that's a basting stitch. And if I hit that, it's going to add a basting stitch all the way around this. So it'll baste it down first, and it moves it to the very first step. So when I hit layout, you'll see there's a black color right here at the top. The basting stitch is going to be first. It's going to baste everything down for me, and that way I'll have less puckers on my embroidery design. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to embroider out this design, and then we're going to move it over to the other part in the back. And then I'm going to start the front, and I'm not going to show you all of that because it's basically the same stuff over and over again, but I do want to show you how you would line it up so that the next second part of the front lines up and you can't tell where you stopped and started again. And I'll get back to that in just a minute. So I've already sewn out this design twice for both pieces of the back, and now we're about ready to sew the same design again to go along the bottom of the front of the skirt. And I don't know if you can see this, but this is the edge of my strip and this is the edge of my strip, and I'm going to put the design right down the middle here, and I want it to line up with the pieces I've already created for the back when I go to sew the skirt together. And I've discovered the easiest way to do that is to take my design that I've already sewn out and lay it on here so that the edges all line up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to hit this design right here that looks like a little arrow going around in a box. And then I can push the bottom corners and see the bottom of this did not line up. So I'm going to move this down, but I still got to keep the edges of my fabric on the edges so that I know I'm putting it in the same place. But the corner looks pretty good to me. It looks like it matches. So I'm going to hit the other corner. It's telling me that I have to push my needle up. That happens every once in a while. And I'm going to hit my other corner and I'm going to check it and see if it lined up. It's a little bit further away than I think I'd like it to be. So I'm going to hit move and I'm going to go over just a little bit, check my needle. So that lines up. So now I know when I go to sew out this design, they're going to be the exact same measurement from the edge of the fabric to where the beginning of the embroidery is, so I can line it up. If it's off a little bit, I'm not going to worry about it because there's a lot of room in the skirt to kind of make some adjustments. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sew this design out on here, and then I'm going to show you how you can line them up for the next piece so it has a continuous border. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so you can see that I've finished my embroidery design and I've rehooped it, so only this much of the design is actually still showing in the hoop, and the rest of this down here is all the blank part that I want to continue with. So I'm going to go ahead and put that on my machine. And I've used the Stellaire Brother app in order to send a picture of my hoop to my machine. And this is the actual design. This is the picture of the hoop, so I can see how much of my design is still showing here. And it makes it very, very easy for me to just bring it over here, line it up, and continue to sew. And if I wanted to, I could push this button up here in the corner, which will give me a zoom, and I can see whether I lined that up the way I wanted it to be, and it looks pretty good. So so that's the way that you would do it if you were going to do it with the app. It's probably the easiest way to go about doing something like this. But I'm going to reach up here and turn off that background picture. So I've got my design in here, but let's say I have a machine that doesn't have the app. I can't see where it stops and starts. So like for instance, I have a 6200 machine. And I do have those two little tailor tacks that were sewn on the machine. Let me see if I can put the hoop back over here so you can see what I'm talking about. These are the little tailor tacks that the machine made. And they didn't make them down here on the edge because this is where I want to line it up, is right here with this edge here. So they made it right there. So that's where I want to line it up. So I'm going to put the hoop back on the machine. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the embroidery screen, and there's a button right here at the bottom that looks like a needle pointing to a plus sign. I'm going to hit that, and then I'm going to go up here. Now this design here is my design without the basting stitch because I want it to line up with my tailor tacks, and if I have the basting stitch around it, it's not going to work. So I deleted the basting stitch. I'm going to hit the corner, and I'm going to see over here to see if my needle, hang on just a second, everything's going to move. So you can see that these are the tailor tacks, and my needle does not line up with that. So what I want to do is I want to go out of that spot. If I come back over here, I'm going to go to the move button, and I'm going to just move it up a little bit so I'm a little bit closer. And then I can see my needle's still not there. So I'm going to move it up a little bit more. Whoops. It's telling me that it doesn't work because my needle's not all the way up. So it's going to move it up a little bit more and then go back over here and then I'm going to check it again. And you just have to keep doing it till you get it all right. And then I'm going to go back over here again, and I'm going to move it over to the other square. And so I'm going to push this button again and come over here. And check the other corner. So let's go back over here and check the other corner and see if it lines up. And there, now I've got it lined up exactly the way I want to, and I can actually just start to embroider. Okay, so I've switched over to my sewing machine because we're going to get ready to put this little dress together. And as I said before, you're going to need a wing needle. It has little wings on either side of the needle, which makes it almost impossible for you to use your needle threader, so don't even try. You're going to have to thread this the old-fashioned way. And this is the package, and I showed that to you a little bit earlier. It says hem stitch needle on it. It's a 100/16, and if you know how needles work, the 100 is the 80, 90, 100. That's the European size. The 10, 12, 14, 16 is the American size. And most wing needles come in a 16 or an 18. I usually use the 16. The 18 can be a little bit too big. And we're going to thread it up with a lightweight thread. You can use a regular cotton lightweight thread, that works, but it needs to be as thin as an embroidery thread, something that's maybe a 60 weight, so that you will actually create the holes that we want to. A heavier weight thread will actually fill in the holes, and then it won't look as pretty as we want it to look. So I'm just going to go ahead and use my Floriani white thread. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use a piece of scrap stabilizer. We all, if we do embroidery, have a whole bunch of pieces that we've torn off, and I'm going to use that to kind of create a pattern. I'm going to take a long strip and I'm going to fold it till it makes a piece that's probably about 3 inches, and then I'm just going to take my scissors and cut a curve. You can create your pattern in whatever way works best for you, but I just want kind of a scalloped look on this, so that's the way I did it. I folded it and cut a scallop, and now I have a scallop. And then I'm going to lay that onto my pattern face down like this, and use a disappearing friction pin to draw the scallop right here. And then I'm going to cut it out using my regular dressmaker shears. Okay, so I moved the camera a little bit because I want you to be able to see the foot of my sewing machine a little bit better. And I've cut the scallop out that I marked, and now I've laid the right side of my embroidery to the wrong side of my skirt panel. And this is just an example of how I'm going to do it. When I get ready to really put this skirt together, I'm going to sew the front panel to the 2 back pieces, and then do the same thing with my hem strips, sew those together so I can do them all at once. And the reason why I want to do that is when I go to sew this side seam and put it together, I don't want to have an ugly edge. I want it to be nice and smooth. So I'll put all the layers together first and then turn it. But I want to be able to show this to you in pieces so you can see kind of what I'm doing. So I'm going to put the foot down here, and I'm going to use the edge of my fabric as a guide so to sew the hem together. And I'm just going to sew straight and connect those 2 pieces together. And then you can see that what I have to do now is I'm going to push this part down and press it, and then flip it around to the other side so that my embroidery is on the right side of the fabric, and I'm going to press that again. And here's a piece where it's already been pressed and it looks really nice along the hem. And now we're going to sew the scallop part. And this is the time when you're going to go ahead and you're going to put that wing needle in there. So I went ahead and I put my wing needle in my machine, and I also put a piece of stabilizer back here on the back. It's really important for you to put stabilizer behind your heirloom sewing. The needle is big and fat and it pushes down in the fabric. It also sews in the same hole several times, so it will actually push down into your fabric, down into your machine, and it'll pucker and it'll look terrible if you don't use a piece of stabilizer. And I usually use the same stitch and wash that I used before because it's very easy to tear off when I'm finished doing my stitching. So the stitch that I have chosen is actually number 307. It's in the heirloom menu that's in my machine. I'm going to put a picture of it up in the corner of the screen so you can see what I'm doing. I've tried a couple of the different heirloom stitches that are in my machine, and I really like the way this one finishes off this edge. This is a raw edge right here, and I don't need to turn it down because the stitching I'm doing right across the edge is going to actually finish off that edge. And I'm keeping the edge of my scallop right down the middle of my sewing machine so that when this does this stitching, it's going on both sides and we'll finish off this stitch. And I'm going to come down right now into the bottom part of this scallop. I'm trying to take a couple stitches so I'm right at the curve, and then I'm going to turn and pivot, and I'm going to keep going, keeping the edge, the raw edge of my fabric right down the center of my foot. And that is going to create a really pretty edge, which I'll try and give you a little bit of a closer look at when I'm finished doing this. So I'm ready to do my bodice now. I went ahead and I cut out the sleeves of the little dress in yellow, and then I cut the back piece out in yellow as well, and I'll cut another 2 pieces for the lining of the backing in probably white, just because that's what I've got extra of. So I'll just do the lining in white. And then I have not cut, this is number 3, this is my front piece of my dress, and I've not cut this out yet because I want to do some heirloom stitching on the bodice, and it's better to do the heirloom stitching first and then cut the pattern piece out after I've got it all, the piece all together, what I'm going to do. So I haven't cut that part out yet. The first thing I want to do is I'm just going to take a square of white fabric that I know that is big enough for what I want to do. And I've made some lines on here with my friction pin with evenly distributed pin tucks, and then a center piece that I can put a decorative stitch on, and I'm going to put a little bit of embroidery on this as well. So the first thing I want to do is I want to put some pin tucks on it. So I'm going to fold on this pink line. I'm going to fold it right on the pink line, and I'm going to put it under my foot so that the needle is about 1/8 of an inch away. And if I put the edge of the fabric right on the edge of the opening of the hole and center my needle, that should do an evenly spaced pin tuck for me. I can use a pin tuck foot and tighten up my tensions, but you almost have to use a batiste or a really lightweight fabric to make that actually work. I've seen too many times where it didn't work. So I'm not even going to attempt that. I'm just going to use a regular old-fashioned way of doing pin tucks, which is folding it. And I'm just going to sew a straight line from the beginning to the end, keeping that as straight as I possibly can. And you can see that I've actually created a little pin tuck there. And I'm going to do it a second time, a third time, and a fourth time till I have 4 pin tucks. So now that I've got my pin tucks done, I'm going to do a star heirloom stitch. I've got a piece of stabilizer back behind this. I'm in this center line that I have created, and I'm going to I'll go in here and I'll put a picture of the star stitch up in the corner of the screen so you can see what I'm talking about. And I'm just going to start sewing it with my wing needle. Unfortunately, when you do a lot of heirloom sewing, you switch back and forth. You go to your regular needle and back to your heirloom, to your wing needle, and then back to your regular needle. So I have a wing needle in here right now. Okay, so I went ahead and I finished doing that, and I don't know if you can see it very well, but I have those little star stitches all the way down the front here. And then I went ahead and I put some yellow decorative stitches that were just in my sewing machine. I could have put it back in the embroidery machine and done that exact same design. I put around the bottom of the skirt on there, but I decided that I was just going to use some of the decorative stitches. If you've ever thought to yourself, I'm never going to use the decorative stitches in my sewing machine, think again, because there's so many places you can just add just a little bit of an embellishment. So I have actually put my zipper foot on here. I would prefer to use a welting foot or a piping foot, but I don't have one with me. So I'm going to use my zipper foot, and I have some store-bought piping that I bought. It's just big enough to add a little bit of embellishment to this. I'm going to lay it on my white fabric, and I have gone with my rotary cutter and cut a nice even edge after the pin tucks here so that it doesn't come out crooked. I'm going to lay the piping right along here, and just to make sure it doesn't move, I'm going to go ahead and sew that on first before I sew the yellow part on there. So I'm going to put it down here under my foot in my sewing machine, and I'm going to move my needle over just a little bit so that it comes down right on the edge where I want it to. And then I'm going to slow this down a little bit and just sew right up against my piping here. I'd rather take the time to do it twice than do it once and mess it up. So I cut that, move it back this way again, and now I'm going to take my yellow fabric right side down on top of the white and the piping, just like this. And then I'm going to put it down the zipper foot again, right up against that piping. Make sure the needle's coming as close to the piping as it possibly can. I could probably move it over just one more. I really want it to be really close. Okay, so I've done both sides now, and you can see this is the look that I was trying to get. I've got the piping on either side. I've got my decorative stitches and my heirloom stitches on there to make the bodice look really cute. And I'll iron it out, and those little pink lines that I drew on there will disappear because it's a friction pin that disappears. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it right along this star stitch that I made right down the center. So if I make sure that fold is going straight down like that, and then I take my pattern piece that says place this line on the fold and place that right on the fold and pin it and cut it out. I'll get a bodice piece that has that right in the center, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just sew this together like you would any other little girl's dress by doing the top and lining it, and then I'm going to show you what it came out to look like when I was all done. Okay, so hey everybody, I went ahead and I finished this little dress. I have to tell you, this took me all day long yesterday, between the heirloom sewing that we did and just putting the dress together. It did take all day long. We are still getting snow here in Colorado, and I'm home from work, so I'm able to finish this video. That's why I'm wearing a different outfit. Remember, I started out with a pattern, so make sure that you buy a little girl's dress pattern before you start to do this, and follow the directions on how to put it together. I'm not going to go into detail on actually sewing a little girl's dress together, but I did want you to see the little dress completely finished. Here's the bodice that we did with the piping, and I even put piping along the waistband right here that just adds just a little bit more fun to it. And then here's all the border sewing that we did. I'm going to put a picture up in the corner to let you see a close-up of what the heirloom sewing that I did along the edge of the scalloped edge here, so that you can see that technique to see if it's something that you would like to do, or maybe you could just finish the edge, turn it under, and top stitch it. You could do it that way. But I thought it added a little bit of fun to this little Easter dress. I think it's going to fit my granddaughter, my great-granddaughter Luna, very well. Here's the back with the little green buttons going down the back. I just am very, very pleased with the way this dress came out. I really wish I could show it to you on her, but as I said before, we're having a snowstorm here, so I don't know when I'm going to get to see her. I will take a picture of her in it and put it on my Instagram page. If you don't follow me on Instagram, I try and put almost every project that we do here in the videos on Instagram. So I hope you had fun doing this little dress, and if not, if you just were able to learn a few techniques on how to use a wing needle in your sewing machine, then it was worth it, wasn't it? So I'd like and subscribe. Easter is coming. Next week is Palm Sunday, and then we have Easter the 4th of April this year, and then I'm going to go on vacation. So I don't know if you're going to see another video from me in the near future, but I think when we get ready to do another video, I'm going to do a table runner with some ice cream cones on it or something like that. If you want to put in the comments an idea that you might have for something that we could do, or something that's on your sewing machine that you don't quite understand, I'll try and answer those questions for you, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.